I've been playing Guild Wars 2 for 10 years, and in that time there have been quite a few highs and lows. Some releases have been exhilarating, truly peak MMO experience, while others have been which is why, in light of the Return to End of Dragon special event being released, I would like to reminisce about the game's highest of highs and lowest of lows. To make that a bit more interesting, let's rank those releases into a top and bottom 6, with each number 1 being the best and the worst respectively. I chose 6 because then we can have a human god associated with each set of numbers. Makes it thematic. I like that. I know technically it's 5 gods now, ever since Balthazar got Thanos snapped by a spicy sword, but we'll just replace him with Lord Faren. Honestly, it's an upgrade. Before we start, just a disclaimer. I primarily focus on PvE and the story, so my highs and lows will be based on that. And of course, it's all my own opinion. If you think my rankings are the worst you've ever seen, great, let me know your top and bottom 6 in the comments below. Without further ado, these are the highs and lows of Guild Wars 2. Down in the Kormir Tier, the 6th highest release of Guild Wars 2 is Grenth Tier Wilds. Now if you've watched the very first video on this channel, then you know my opinions about Grenth Tier Wilds. I enjoyed it. The visual design of Lowland Shore and Grenth Tier Sentry was fantastic. I love seeing what players are making with the new homestead system, and adding land spears was an obvious decision as they were wanted for years. The expansion even convinced me to try its new Convergence, which was a PvE mode I really didn't try in Secrets of the Obscure. But then, with all my praises, why is Grenth Tier Wilds only the 6th highest release of Guild Wars 2? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, the expansion is not technically finished yet, and I want to hold my judgment until it is. To place it above other finished content doesn't feel right. Secondly, while the story was okay, it was still only okay. I liked the Tyrian Alliance parts, loved seeing old faces brought back into relevance, but the rest of the story did not grab me as other expansions did. Regardless, Grenth Tier Wilds is still an example of a high moment in the history of Guild Wars 2. As its partner in the Kormir Tier, the 6th lowest release of Guild Wars 2 might be surprising. It's the 3rd expansion, End of Dragons. See, the rankings are already getting controversial. Back in 2020, when the announcement of End of Dragons happened, the hype was real. Cantha's back, and the new juicy content on the level of Path of Fire and Heart of Thorns was on its way. When it was eventually released in 2022, I thought it was good. The opening where you fight on the moving airships and jump between them, it was great. Setong Province was a aesthetic standout, and the dialogue was wittier than ever.
What is it, a shiv? We need to establish dominance.
Establish dominance!
Yet, there were problems here that were not present in previous expansions. The main story surrounding the Void and the Asura DeviantArt original character Do Not Steal, I just didn't click with it. I was invested in Path of Fire and Heart of Thorns. The story beats there hit hard. It just didn't feel that way as much here. And while the open world gameplay in Setong Province was some of the best, and the metas in Echovold Wilds and Dragon's End were fun, I hated New Kaineng City. The exploring sucked, the meta event sucked, I didn't like it. The sad part is that it had so much potential as a PvE map, like futuristic Divinity's Reach with combat events, but for a city it feels desolate, and the combat events were nothing to write home about. There's a reason I have rarely returned to Cantha since the expansion came out. The more time elapses, the less I even think about it. But I will say that when I played it for the first time on release, it was a great time. But when compared to expansions past, it was not on the same level, which is why I put it as the best of the low moments in Guild Wars 2. Moving up to the Grenth Tier, the 5th highest moment in Guild Wars 2 was the release of Living World Season 3. The first Living World to feature a new open world map with every episode, I have some fond memories of Season 3's release, its maps, and of course, the story. Since the ending of Heart of Thorns, the story had once again picked up with a bang, pun intended, and provided the necessary setup for later story developments both in Season 3 and Path of Fire. The return of many iconic Guild Wars 1 elements, such as the White Mantle and the Mersat, was a great way to continue the story without just going into another Elder Dragon fight. And of course, this season had one of the best plot twists in the story so far. Character-wise, Season 3 was just as good as Heart of Thorns, if not better. Codicus is one of my favorite antagonists. He's just the worst. I love him. This season also contained peak Canuck. It was the writing for him in this release that made him a fan favorite, and some of the best lines of dialogue are from him.
How do you think the conversation with the sculptor went when he ordered these?
I need at least 6 reliefs of my face. No, bigger. Like 8 feet tall.
We were introduced to Aurene here, who would become probably the most important character in the entire game. And I couldn't forget how Season 3 was also peak Bram. And by peak, I mean this is the peak of him being the whiniest Norn on Tyria.
It's what I do.
It's his thing.
He does get better, but not very much. The story and characters themselves are enough to put Living World Season 3 as a high moment in Guild Wars 2, but the maps released seal the deal. They are not as good as the maps in the expansions or later Living Worlds, which is why Season 3 is only the 5th highest, but the quantity of content here is quite good. For me, the standout maps are Lake Doric and Draconic Mons. Lake Doric because I love a good PvE battlefield map, and Draconic Mons due to its unique environment and vertical layout. I know Draconic Mons gets a bad rep from those stuck there completing Aurora and Wayfarer's Hedge. Trust me, I've been there. I got both of them. But despite the days upon days I spent there, I can't bring myself to hate it. If that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is. Opposing Living World Season 3, the 5th lowest release of Guild Wars 2 is Secrets of the Obscure. Now I wanted to like Secrets of the Obscure. I wanted the new approach of smaller but more frequent expansions to work well, but for the most part it was okay, and only okay. First of all, the good parts. Wizard's Vault. It's grown on me, and although I miss my Mystic coin farm from just logging in, it's an improvement from the old system. New strike missions, always enjoy getting more of those. Weapon master training, more build variety, great. However, my favorite part of this expansion was probably the little stories that put the prior story into a new context. Like for example, the revelation that the awakened merchant that you keep seeing in Amnoon, Grothmar Valley, and Arborstone is actually an Astro Ward agent spying on the player character. I don't know, I just thought that was such a neat detail. Now for the less good parts, the main story of Secrets of the Obscure. It started off intriguing, the mysterious disappearance of the Wizard's Tower from Garenhof and your first experience in Nyos. Great introduction. But I don't think the rest of the expansion lived up to that introduction, especially the last third, but we will get to that further up the list. The Cryptus demons, which are first shown to be these existential threats that can corrupt the minds of tremendously powerful characters, become trivial as you slaughter wave upon wave of them. I understand you can't make them impossibly powerful for gameplay purposes, but the gap between how strong you are told they are and what you fight in the open world is distracting. Speaking of the open world, the maps featured in this expansion are not the game's best. The first map is the better one, as tends to be the case, with a unique floating island aesthetic with tons of wildly different areas, but the second area, Omnitas, has the same problem as New Kainang. Everything looks the same. Getting around is a chore, and the meta event is also not my favorite. Additionally, Secrets of the Obscure marked the first of ArenaNet's new expansion model and the end of Living World, which I know was changed due to economic reality, but I still vastly prefer the old system, which made expansions feel like these massive events. Secrets of the Obscure is my least favorite expansion, but it does have some good aspects, which is why I place it at the 5th lowest moment of Guild Wars 2. Onto the Lyssa Tier, the release I would put as the 4th highest moment of Guild Wars 2 is the first 4 episodes of Icebrood Saga. I don't know if this is a hot take, but when the first 4 episodes of Icebrood Saga were coming out late 2019, early 2020, I thought it was the best, and it was my second favorite Living World. Even after everything that happened in episode 5, I still think that. In isolation of that finale, those first 4 episodes were bangers. One could even say bangars. Anyways, let's talk about why that is. To start, the story Icebrood Saga opened with was ambitious, and to focus on the Char and the Norn was much needed. Ryland, Bangar, and the Civil War made the conflict with Jormag much more interesting than previous dragon fights had been. Our return to the far Shiver Peaks, an area players last saw in Guild Wars 1, was great fan service, finally being able to kill Drakar being the cherry on top. I can't forget to mention the cinematics in this release as well, that Freyr one especially. It's emblematic of the nuanced relationship we have with antagonists in Icebrood Saga compared to other releases. All in all, the feeling I got through the story in the first 4 episodes was that ArenaNet was experimenting and trying something new. The fact they named it Icebrood Saga and not just Living World Season 5, or that its prologue is practically a whole episode, is a testament to this new approach. They wanted to make something more complicated. The Fortune Steel strike mission and the antagonist perspective was unlike any other in Guild Wars 2, which I can respect. Better than the story, however, the first 4 episodes of Icebrood Saga had some of the most consistently great maps and gameplay Guild Wars 2 had ever seen. From its start in Grothmar Valley, containing still the greatest MMO event ever witnessed, to Bjorn Marches, with its 2 meta events and exceptional atmosphere. And finally, Drizzlewood Coast, one of the most fun maps to farm in this entire game. Icebrood Saga had no shortage of gameplay options, both in its map and in the strike missions that the release debuted. I still return to these maps, I still play the strike missions, I still like the first 4 episodes of Icebrood Saga, which is why I put it as the 4th highest release in the history of Guild Wars 2. In contrast to the best part of an otherwise bad release, the 4th lowest moment in Guild Wars 2 was the worst part of a good experience, the Zhaitan fight at the end of the main story. The original Guild Wars 2 low, the Zhaitan fight has gained quite a bit of infamy over the years, as most Guild Wars 2 players have finished the personal story at least once in the 13 years it has existed. Most people know exactly how disappointing this was. All that build-up, from your humble beginnings rising in your preferred order to the slow advance in ore against the overwhelming forces of Zhaitan. The first Elder Dragon we faced had been built up as the be-all and end-all battle since the beginning. Every story beat, every mission, every action was to kill the Rob Zombie of dragons. What did players face when they finally met face to face with the dragon? A massive world boss requiring every bit of strength from you and your allies? A fight for the ages, with the player pulling out all the stops. No, you press F, and then press 1 a bunch of times, oh, then Zhaitan dies. To say the least, could have been better, which is why this is the 4th lowest moment in Guild Wars 2. Meandering our way to the Melandru Tier, the 3rd highest moment in Guild Wars 2 history was the release of Heart of Thorns. The very first Guild Wars 2 expansion. It was long awaited and well received. It added the mastery system, gliding, guild halls, adventures, elite specializations, the Revenant, all things I cannot imagine Guild Wars 2 without. More so than any other release, I feel like Heart of Thorns has become more appreciated by the player base as time goes on, and its influence remains ever present. I cannot count how many times updrafts and bouncing mushrooms have appeared in releases since. The reason I say more appreciated is that I remember when the expansion came out, there was quite a bit of grumbling, probably because of the difficulty spike. However, that spike was much needed. Guild Wars 2 PvE had long been too forgiving, and Heart of Thorns offered the challenge the game was needing and forced players to learn about CC and general tactics. I for one know that after my first experience with Pocket Raptors, I had to actually make a good build and learn it. Now I'm a better player, but I still hate Pocket Raptors. I know I'm weird, but actually one of my favorite additions were adventures. They made great daily XP for the grindiest of masteries, and I really enjoyed perfecting my time. I still have a top 50 time in Tendril Tortures to this day. Alongside my ardent hatred of Pocket Raptors, it's funny how it's the little things you remember most fondly. Of course, the big stuff is great as well. The constant uphill fight for survival against Mordremoth throughout the expansion story was one of the game's most engaging. Characters were dying, our mission felt difficult. The final battle with Mordremoth, both in the story and in the Dragon Stand meta event, was also far more fun than Zhaitan's. The open world maps were a big step forward as well, particularly in their verticality. The heart of Maguma felt like a true jungle, dangerous and full of life, and the events in these maps were amazing. The defense of Tarir is the obvious one to mention, it's still popular, but I've always been partial to Verdant Brink's meta. I've done it a billion times, and it's changed a lot since the release of the Skyscale and Griffin. but at release, it was one of the first coordinated events I'd ever participated in, and by God, it was fun. It is that fun I so vividly remember, plus everything else, that bestows Heart of Thorns as the third highest release in Guild Wars 2. Unlike Heart of Thorns, the third lowest release of Guild Wars 2 is often forgot that it even exists, Gaela Delve. The epilogue release of End of Dragons, Gaela Delve and the 3 story chapters it came with were not well received by players. Sure, at first it was exciting, more free content and a new area which had good aesthetics and an interesting enemy to fight. But with time, and after the following 2 batches offered very little, the release became one of the most disappointing. A lot of it comes from the story, which, speaking for myself, I did not care for. The only thing that motivated me to complete it was my boy Rama and Gorik. That's it. Some people liked the story, the reintroduction of demons, and the theme of your player character coping with everything that has happened to them. But I just wasn't one of those. While I appreciate the foreshadowing to the Cryptus we see in the expansion immediately following this, I found the story to be the weakest part. The actual map, while better, has problems. The time-gated events that block off certain areas, basically requiring a successful meta to see the whole map, is very frustrating for people who just want to explore and get map completion. That wouldn't be a problem in any other map, except Gaela Delve spends more time dead than your average elementalist. Even with its massive farming potential, with each run just vomiting gear and crafting materials at you, no one wants to play this map. I think that's the most damning evidence of all. The return to End of Dragons event changed that a bit, but when it's over, I don't think many will be back. Even if you do, like the achievement junkies among us, since it requires so many players not to fail, the only way to play it is to hope there's a commander in the LFG running it. Most other meta events, you can scrounge up a success from an underpopulated map. It's not uncommon, but there's little chance to do it here. It requires the size, leadership, and time commitment of Dragon's End without the staying power that the map has, which is why I consider Gaela Delve to be the third lowest release of Guild Wars 2. Making it all the way up to the Dwayna tier, the second highest moment of Guild Wars 2 was the release of Path of Fire. This one you were all expecting. Maybe not at number 2, but I think you all know that Path of Fire is always at the top. Ever since its release in 2015, we have known that this expansion hits different. Not 4, but 5 new maps in the Crystal Desert, new elite specializations, raids, weapons, armor, bounties, one of the best stories that we've ever seen, mounts. Oh, they're so good. They're so good. Path of Fire is the benchmark of a good expansion. Honestly, me saying that feels redundant because it's almost self-evident. The mount system alone that Path of Fire introduced proves that. There is weight to their movement, and each mount's unique ability gives them all a purpose. It's no wonder that this system is what Guild Wars 2 has become known for. Alongside the mount system, the maps that were crafted with them in mind are a joy to explore. They are massive, and yet still have interesting things to find in every nook and crevice. Little things like that remind me of the first time playing the story and arriving in Alona on that airship. I remember being so impressed with how instead of watching a cutscene of the airship docking, it actually happens in-game with you standing on the ship. No separate instance, all seamless. Maybe I'm simple, maybe I'm easily impressed, but little things like that are what separates the good from the great. It isn't just the introduction which the story nails. The main antagonist, Balthazar, is still one of the most threatening. He literally kills the player character and we go to the underworld. Memorable story beats like that, not to mention meeting Palawa Joko for the first time, and of course the final battle where we command Joko's undead against Balthazar's forged army wielding Ritlock's sword. It's epic, it's cinematic, it's Path of Fire. But with all my praise, why is Path of Fire only the second highest high in the history of Guild Wars 2? Well, it was a tough decision, and I consider both Path of Fire and number 1 to be neck and neck for the top position, but I will explain myself when I get to number 1. But first, we must address the second lowest release of Guild Wars 2, the third part of Secrets of the Obscure, Nyos. By far my least favorite part of my least favorite expansion, both the story and the zone it came with were some of Guild Wars 2's weakest. The story particularly felt predictable. I remember near the start, we are introduced to a friendly, small, innocent Cryptus demon, and immediately I knew what would happen. This new character is going to be killed by the antagonist to show how evil they are, and this will be what drives the player character to defeat the antagonist. Then 3 seconds later, exactly that happened. That took me right out of the story immediately. I know narratively what they were trying to do, but that attempt felt so heavy-handed and obvious that it was distracting. The zone of Inner Nios was no better. Since it was split into 3 separate batches, it was drip-fed to players in such a way that there never felt like there was much to do. You could grind the same events in an area where everything looks the same, but that was about it. I would just play through the story, speedrun the achievement mastery on the first day, and then get the hell out of, well, hell. This is when I started playing PvP, which says something about my enjoyment of Nios for a mainly PvE player to be so uninterested in the new PvE release that I was driven to play PvP. It's like having your morning cup of coffee taste so bad it made you take black tar heroin instead. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. Some things were better than others. They added more adventures. I like adventures. They weren't the best, but it's something. And even though I dislike the aesthetic design of Nios, I appreciate that Guild Wars 2 tried to make something new and otherworldly. See, the 3 Nios releases and Secrets of the Obscure are not irredeemable, but they're not good. I have not returned to the zone since the final section was released, and I don't think I will anytime soon. That is why Nios is the second lowest moment in Guild Wars 2. Before we move on to the last tier, an honorable mention for the high and low moments that just barely didn't make it onto the list. The high moment is the return to Living World Season 1. I started playing Guild Wars 2 after Season 1 was long gone, and so I was never able to experience that iconic era of the game. This is especially a problem in Season 2 and Heart of Thorns when characters who were introduced in Season 1 talked to me like an old friend, when I had never seen these people before in my life. But with this release, all is fixed, although I would have liked to play the South Sun Cove part as well. Not sure why they left that out. The low moment, on the other hand, is more a personal low than anything else. The cod swimming amongst mere minnows achievement. I did this achievement, and it was the most time-consuming, aggravating thing I'd ever done. I will never look at fishing the same way again. With the honorable mentions out of the way, finally, in the Faren Tier, the greatest of them all, is the highest release of Guild Wars 2, Living World Season 4. After the release of Path of Fire, I didn't think Guild Wars 2 could get much better, but in November of 2017, everything changed. Season 4 had arrived, and every episode it released was just as good as the last. The new maps, Istan, Sandswept Isles, Korna, Jahai, Thunderhead, Dragonfall, all fantastic gameplay and visual design. I still don't think I've enjoyed farming achievements more than I have in Season 4, especially when those achievements reward you with the Roller Beetle and Sky Scale, two of the most useful and stylish mounts in the entire game. The story, of course, is one of the game's best. First dealing with Palawa Joko, his antics, and that iconic finale when he got the Lord Farquaad treatment. Then it was Kraukotorik vs Aurene, which after a big comeback had quite the emotional end. All of this is portrayed in some of the most cinematic and grand set pieces the game has ever seen, coupled with new beloved characters like Gorik and Blish, and it was like a second Path of Fire had been released. I mean, there's enough content here for a full expansion. A great example to illustrate how captivating Season 4 is, especially the story, was an experience I had in Episode 5, All or Nothing. I was there loitering in Thunderhead Peaks, and it was a couple days after the episode had released, so at this time many people were finishing the episode's story, specifically that ending. You know what I'm talking about. And people were talking about it in map chat. They were talking about the story and discussing the implications this development would have for its future. This doesn't happen in map chat. Map chat is for unhinged ramblings. Yet, there it was. That story was so engaging, so moving, that it turned map chat into a Socratic circle. I rest my case. I do have to admit that a significant part for my decision to put Season 4 over Path of Fire as my highest of highs is my history with it. I've played Guild Wars 2 for a long time, and I've always liked it, but Season 4 was when I loved it. Every new episode released enraptured me like no other. Every day, the moment I got home, I was playing Guild Wars 2. I was grinding achievements, I was playing the story, I was getting invested. But most importantly, the Season 4 years were when I had the most fun. That is why it is my pick for the highest moment in the long history of Guild Wars 2. Now for Season 4's dark opposite, what I consider the lowest release of Guild Wars 2. It's Icebrood Saga Episode 5, Champions. You all saw this coming. It's amazing how one episode in an otherwise good Icebrood Saga can completely ruin the entire season, its reputation, its conclusion, its everything. I believe the reason for this is the primary gameplay addition of Champions, Dragon Response Missions. The story wasn't the best either, and the ending was anticlimactic, except for the Ryland stuff, that was pretty good. But it's these Dragon Response Missions that bear the blame. They are okay the first time you complete one, but they all feel the same and quickly become repetitive and a chore. This problem is compounded by the fact that this episode was split into 4 chapters, meaning that if you played Champions when it came out, as you waited for the next chapter, the only new content you had was the same few Dragon Response missions. Even when that next chapter released, and you would log into Guild Wars 2 excited, ooh, what's gonna be in this new update? More Dragon Response missions. The next one, even more.
I tell you what, you've got work. That's what you got, work. Monday to Friday work. Next Monday to Friday mail work.
They must have thought that these Dragon Response missions would be well received by the players, like strike missions had been, for how many the game expected us to complete. But they were anything but well received, and every new Dragon Response mission released was like salt on the wound. They eventually added Dragonstorm at the end, but it was too late. The player base had already soured on episode 5, myself included. It's fitting that the initials of Icebrood Saga is IBS, because this last episode gave me irritable bowel syndrome. It is the lowest of the low that Guild Wars 2 has to offer, and I pray no future release takes its place. That was the highs and lows of Guild Wars 2. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it this far, consider liking and subscribing. There's still so much I feel like I haven't mentioned about these releases, but this is already a long video and we all have places to be. Not me though. I'm too busy playing Guild Wars 2.
What's saving? What's saving? What's saving?